The lawyer's call came 3 days after my grandmother's funeral. "Miss Carter, this is Howard Chin from Chin and Associates. I'm handling Eleanor Carter's estate. I need you to attend the will reading this Friday at 2 p.m. I almost said no. My relationship with my family had been strained for years, and I couldn't imagine why I'd be included in Grandma Eleanor's will. My parents had made it abundantly clear that I shouldn't expect anything. "You chose to reject this family's values," my mother had said during our last conversation 6 months ago. "Don't expect to benefit from the wealth you despise." That conversation had happened after I'd refused to take over the family's real estate business, choosing instead to become a social worker. My parents had been furious. My older brother Marcus had stepped up to run the business, and he'd become the golden child while I became the black sheep. "I'll be there," I told the lawyer, though I had no idea why. Friday arrived cold and gray. I drove to the law offices in downtown Seattle, wearing my only good suit, purchased secondhand because social workers don't make much money. The building was intimidating, all glass and steel, the kind of place that screamed wealth and power. In the conference room, my family was already assembled. My mother, Victoria Carter, sat at the head of the table in a black designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My father, Richard Carter, stood by the window in an expensive suit. Marcus sat beside them, looking smug and comfortable. "Sophia," Mother said coolly when I entered. "We weren't sure you'd come." "The lawyer asked me to," I replied, taking a seat at the far end of the table. "I'm surprised Grandma included you in the will," Marcus said, "given how you've disappointed the family." I bit back a response. Marcus had always been like this, condescending and superior. He'd gone to business school, married into another wealthy family, and produced 2 perfect grandchildren. He'd done everything right in our parents' eyes. I'd done everything wrong. I'd gotten a master's in social work instead of an MBA. I'd taken a low-paying job helping homeless families instead of joining the family business. I'd married Ben, a public school teacher, instead of someone from an appropriate social circle. And worst of all, I'd been vocal about my disagreement with how my family made their money, buying up low-income housing and raising rents to maximize profits. Howard Chin entered with a thick folder. "Thank you all for coming. Let's begin." He opened the folder and pulled out a document. "This is the last will and testament of Eleanor Frances Carter, dated March 15, 2023, approximately 18 months before her passing. My grandmother had been the matriarch of our family. She'd built the Carter real estate empire from nothing, starting with a single rental property and growing it to over 200 buildings across 3 states. She'd been tough, business-savvy, and intensely private. I'd loved her, but we'd never been close. She was always working, always building, always focused on the business." "I'll skip to the relevant sections," Howard said. "To my son Richard and his wife Victoria, I leave my personal effects and the family home in which they currently reside. To my grandson Marcus, I leave control of Carter Properties, including all real estate holdings, business operations, and associated assets." Marcus smiled triumphantly. Mother and father nodded with satisfaction. This was exactly what they'd expected. Howard continued. "To my granddaughter Sophia, I leave the sum of $500. $500. I tried not to show any reaction, though the amount stung. It was barely enough to cover the cost of driving here. Marcus actually laughed. $500. That's about what you're worth to this family, I'd say." "Marcus, please," Howard said sharply. "I'm not finished." He pulled out another document. "This is a codicil to the will, dated 6 weeks before Mrs. Carter's death. It contains significant changes." The room went silent. Father moved from the window to the table. Mother's hand went to her throat. "What kind of changes?" Father demanded. Howard read from the document. "I, Eleanor Frances Carter, being of sound mind and body, do hereby make the following amendments to my last will and testament. After much reflection on my life's work and my family's future, I wish to make corrections that better reflect my true values and wishes." He paused, looking at each of us. "The previous bequest to Marcus Carter of the business and properties is hereby revoked. Instead, I leave Marcus Carter the sum of $50,000 and my collection of business books, in hopes that he will learn from them what he has failed to learn from experience." Marcus went pale. "What? That's impossible. Please let me finish," Howard said firmly. The Carter Properties business, all real estate holdings, investment portfolios and associated assets are instead left in trust to my granddaughter Sophia Carter with the following conditions. She must maintain ownership for a minimum of 5 years, during which time she may choose to continue operating the business, reform its practices or sell it entirely. Any proceeds from sale or operation are hers to use as she sees fit. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. This can't be legal, Mother said, her voice shrill. Eleanor was clearly not of sound mind. I have 3 doctors' evaluations from the time of the codicil signing, Howard interrupted. All attest to Mrs. Carter's perfect mental competency. I also have a video recording of the signing, in which she explicitly states her reasons for the changes. I want to see that video, Father demanded. Howard set up a laptop on the table. My grandmother's face appeared on screen, looking frail but alert. She was in her bedroom, propped up with pillows, and the date stamp showed it was recorded 6 weeks before she died. If you're watching this, then I've passed away and my will has been read, Grandma Eleanor said on the video. Richard Victoria Marcus, you're probably shocked and angry. You expected Marcus to inherit the business. You've been grooming him for it since he was a teenager. She coughed, then continued. But I've watched Marcus run the company for the past 3 years and I've seen what he's become. Ruthless without wisdom. Profit-focused without compassion. He's everything I was in my worst moments and none of what I became at the end. Tears filled her eyes. Marcus, you evicted 15 families from the Riverside apartments to convert them to luxury condos. You doubled rents on elderly tenants living on fixed incomes. You fought against tenant protection laws that would have helped vulnerable people. You've made millions, but at what cost? Marcus was red-faced, his jaw clenched. Mother looked like she might faint. I built this empire through hard work and sometimes ruthless decisions, Grandma continued. But in my final years I've had time to think about my legacy. Is it just buildings and money? Or is it the lives I've impacted? The families I've housed? The communities I've shaped? She looked directly at the camera. Sophia is the only one in this family who understands that wealth carries responsibility. She's dedicated her life to helping people, even when it meant disappointing her parents and living modestly. She's shown me what true character looks like. Sophia, if you're watching this, I need you to understand something, Grandma said. I was wrong about you. For years I thought you were naive and idealistic. I thought your social work was a waste of your education. Your parents convinced me that you'd rejected the family because you thought you were better than us. She wiped her eyes. But 6 months ago I saw something that changed my mind completely. I was driving past the Riverside apartments when I saw you there. You were helping one of the families we'd evicted move their belongings into a shelter. You spent your own money to rent them a truck. You carried their boxes in the rain. My breath caught. I remembered that day. I'd been so angry about the eviction that I'd tracked down the displaced families to help them personally. I'd had no idea Grandma had seen me. I sat in my car and watched you work for hours, Grandma continued. And I thought about my life. About the choices I'd made. About the empire I'd built on the backs of people who could barely afford rent. About the grandson I'd groomed to be even more heartless than I'd been. She leaned forward intensely. Sophia, I'm giving you the business not as a burden but as an opportunity. You have a chance to transform it into something better. Something that makes money while also helping people. I know you can do it because you have something Marcus never will. A conscience. The video ended. The room was silent except for my mother's sharp breathing. This is outrageous, Father finally said. Eleanor was obviously manipulated. By whom? Howard asked. Sophia hasn't spoken to her grandmother in months. There's no evidence of any contact or influence. Mrs. Carter made this decision entirely on her own after witnessing Sophia's actions. I'm contesting this will, Marcus said, standing up. That business is mine. I've run it for 3 years. I've increased profits by 40%. By evicting poor families and pricing out elderly tenants, I found my voice finally. By prioritizing profit over people. Grandma saw what you'd become, Marcus. That's why she made this change. You don't know anything about running a business. Marcus shouted. You're a bleeding heart social worker who's never managed anything larger than a case file. You'll destroy everything I've built. Everything Grandma built, I corrected. And maybe it needs to be destroyed if it's built on exploitation. Mother stood up, her face twisted with anger. You ungrateful little. You've always thought you were better than us. Now you're stealing your brother's inheritance. I'm not stealing anything, I said, my voice shaking. Grandma made a choice. She saw who Marcus had become and she didn't want that as her legacy. You turned her against us. Mother accused. You poisoned her mind with your liberal nonsense about helping the poor. I barely spoke to Grandma in the last 2 years. I said, you know that. I was too busy working 60-hour weeks trying to help people your company was destroying. The accusation hung in the air. Father moved toward me, his face cold. You will refuse this inheritance. You will sign it over to Marcus or you're no longer part of this family. I stood up to face him. I haven't been part of this family for years, Dad. Not since I chose a different path. You've made that very clear. If you take this inheritance, you'll have nothing to do with us, Mother said. No family events, no holidays, no contact. You'll be completely cut off. I looked at my parents, at Marcus, at the family that had never really accepted who I was. I can live with that, I said. You're making a mistake, Father said coldly. Without family you have nothing. I have my husband. I have my work. I have my integrity, I replied. And apparently I have a business to reform. Howard cleared his throat. There are additional provisions in the will. Mrs. Carter established a trust fund for Sophia's living expenses during the transition period. $50,000 per year for the first 3 years, to be drawn from business profits. She thought of everything, Marcus said bitterly. She knew exactly how to cut me out. She gave you $50,000 and a chance to learn from your mistakes, I said. That's more generous than you deserve. Marcus moved toward me and for a moment I thought he might actually hit me. Father grabbed his arm. We're leaving, Father said. Howard, you'll be hearing from our lawyers. This will is going to be contested on every possible ground. That's your right, Howard said calmly. Though I should mention that Mrs. Carter anticipated this. She left detailed documentation of her reasoning, multiple witnesses to her mental state, and enough legal protection to make contesting extremely difficult and expensive. After they left, I sat down heavily. My hands were shaking. Are you okay? Howard asked. I just inherited a business worth millions while completely alienating my family, I said. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel. Howard sat across from me. Your grandmother left you a letter. She asked me to give it to you after the will reading in private. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter in Grandma's elegant handwriting. My dear Sophia, if you're reading this, then you've just experienced the aftermath of my will reading. I imagine your parents and Marcus were not pleased. I'm sorry for the conflict this will cause, but I'm not sorry for my decision. You are the only one in this family who has the character and the vision to do what needs to be done with Carter Properties. I built this business through determination and sometimes ruthless tactics. I told myself I was providing housing, creating jobs, building communities. But the truth is, I often prioritized profit over people. I rationalized every hard decision by saying it was just business. Your brother has taken that philosophy even further. He's turned the company into a machine that extracts maximum value from vulnerable people. That's not the legacy I want to leave. You have a rare combination of business education and genuine compassion. You understand how companies work, but you also understand how people work. You've spent years helping families in crisis. You know what they need. Use that knowledge. Transform Carter Properties into something better. The letter continued. I'm not naive. I know this won't be easy. You'll face resistance from employees, from Marcus's allies, from people who don't want change. You'll be tempted to sell everything and wash your hands of the whole enterprise. But I'm asking you to try. Try to build a business that makes money while also helping people. Show the world that profit and compassion aren't mutually exclusive. I've left you resources to make this work. The trust fund will support you financially while you learn the business. I've also left detailed notes about properties, operations, and people you can trust within the company. There's a folder in the safe at the main office with everything you need to know. The combination is your birthday, month, day, year. Trust Howard Chin. He's been my lawyer for 30 years and he's completely honest. Trust Margaret Williams, the operations manager. She's competent and ethical and she's been frustrated by Marcus's decisions. And trust yourself. You're smarter and stronger than you realize. You've survived being the black sheep of this family. You've built a life on your own terms. You can do this. Make me proud. And more importantly, make yourself proud. Transform my empire into something worthy of your values. With love and hope, Grandma Eleanor. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Howard handed me a tissue. She really believed in you, he said. I don't know if I can do this, I admitted. I've never run a business. I don't know anything about real estate beyond seeing how it impacts my clients. But you know exactly how it impacts people, Howard interrupted. That's what Eleanor wanted. Someone who understands the human cost of business decisions. Over the next week, I met with Howard repeatedly to understand what I'd inherited. The numbers were staggering. Carter Properties owned 217 buildings across Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. The portfolio was worth approximately $43 million. Annual revenue was around $8 million, with profit margins of about 30% after expenses. I also inherited the staff, 15 people who worked in the main office, plus property managers for each building, maintenance crews, and contractors. Most of them had worked for Grandma or Marcus for years. The employees are going to be skeptical, Howard warned. Many of them are loyal to Marcus. They're used to his management style, aggressive, profit-focused. You're going to seem soft to them. Then I'll have to prove I'm not, I said. My first day at the Carter Properties office was terrifying. I walked into the building in downtown Seattle, a modern space with glass walls and expensive furniture. The staff gathered in the conference room, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. I'm Sophia Carter, I began. Some of you remember me from family events. Others only know me as the granddaughter who rejected the business. I'm sure you've all heard that I've inherited control of Carter Properties. A man in his 50s spoke up. We've heard. We've also heard you're a social worker with no business experience. Is that true? Yes, I said honestly. I have an MBA that I've never used because I chose a different career. I've spent the last 5 years working with homeless families and low-income housing advocacy. I know nothing about day-to-day property management. The staff exchanged glances. I could see their doubts. But I know something you might not know, I continued. I know what happens to families when rents increase faster than wages. I know what happens to children when they're evicted from the only home they've known. I know what happens to communities when housing becomes unaffordable. This is a business, not a charity, a woman said sharply. I recognized her from the photos Marcus had shown at family dinners. Karen Schultz, the leasing manager. You're right, I said. This is a business and it needs to be profitable to survive. But there are different ways to be profitable. My grandmother asked me to transform this company into something better. Something that makes money while also serving the community. That's what I intend to do. How? Karen demanded. By driving away our best tenants and lowering rents until we go bankrupt? By finding a better balance, I said. By making strategic decisions about which properties to upgrade and which to keep affordable. By working with community organizations to help tenants before they need eviction notices. By investing in maintenance so buildings last longer and tenants stay longer. That's not how Marcus ran things, another man said. No, I agreed. And that's why my grandmother changed her will. She didn't want the company run the way Marcus was running it. I pulled out a folder. I've spent the past week reviewing every property in our portfolio. I've looked at occupancy rates, maintenance records, tenant complaints, and turnover data. Would you like to know what I found? The staff looked interested despite themselves. The properties with the highest turnover, where we're constantly having to find new tenants and lose money on empty units, are the ones where we've raised rents the most aggressively. The properties with stable, long-term tenants are the ones with reasonable rents and good maintenance. I projected a spreadsheet onto the screen. Look at Riverside Apartments, where Marcus evicted 15 families to do luxury conversions. The conversion cost $2 million. The new units have been on the market for 6 months and only 5 of 15 have rented, because the market isn't as strong as projected. We've lost hundreds of thousands in expected revenue. Compare that to Sunset Gardens, where we've kept rents stable and invested in regular maintenance. Occupancy rate is 98%. Tenant turnover is almost zero. Revenue is consistent and predictable. Which property is actually more profitable in the long run? The staff was quiet, looking at the numbers. I'm not proposing we become a charity, I said. I'm proposing we become smarter about how we do business. Keep good tenants happy so they stay. Invest in maintenance to avoid costly emergency repairs. Work with struggling tenants before eviction becomes necessary. Build relationships with community organizations that can help when tenants face temporary hardships. And what about properties that aren't profitable? Karen asked. Do we just keep losing money? If a property isn't profitable and can't be made profitable through better management, then we sell it, I said. But we do it thoughtfully, working with tenant organizations to ensure current residents aren't displaced. We sell to buyers who will maintain affordable housing, even if it means accepting a slightly lower price. That's not how you maximize profit, Karen said. No, it's how you build sustainable profit and a positive reputation, I countered. My grandmother built this business over 40 years. She didn't do it by squeezing every dollar out of every transaction. She did it by building relationships and trust. We're going back to those principles. I looked at the assembled staff. I know this is a change from how Marcus operated. Some of you will embrace it. Others won't. If you can't work within this new framework, I understand. I'll provide good references and severance packages. But if you stay, I need you committed to this vision. Margaret Williams, the operations manager, spoke up. I'll stay. I've been arguing for these kinds of changes for years. I'm glad someone's finally listening. Others nodded slowly. Not everyone was convinced, but I'd planted seeds of doubt about Marcus's methods and hope for a better approach. Over the next few months, I threw myself into learning the business. I shadowed Margaret, attended property manager meetings, visited every building in our portfolio, and met with tenant associations. I also made hard decisions. I fired Karen Schultz when I discovered she'd been accepting bribes from contractors in exchange for inflated maintenance contracts. I promoted property managers who showed genuine care for their buildings and tenants. I instituted new policies. No rent increases above inflation without significant property improvements, required maintenance response within 48 hours, and a hardship fund to help good tenants facing temporary financial crises. You're going to bankrupt the company, Marcus told me when he called 3 months into my tenure. Our profit margins are dropping. Our profit margins dropped by 8%. I corrected. We're still profitable. And our occupancy rates are up, tenant satisfaction is up, and our reputation in the community is improving dramatically. We're building long-term value. You're destroying everything I built. Marcus said bitterly. You're building something better, I replied. Something Grandma would actually be proud of. Marcus hung up on me. My parents hadn't spoken to me since the will reading. True to their word, I was completely cut off from the family. It hurt more than I'd expected. But my life outside the family was thriving. Ben was incredibly supportive, helping me navigate the stress of running a business while maintaining my values. My former colleagues at the social services agency were amazed and offered advice on working with vulnerable populations. And gradually, I was earning the respect of the Carter Properties staff. 6 months after taking over, I faced my first major crisis. One of our largest properties, the Maple Street Apartments with 120 units, needed major repairs. The electrical system was outdated and potentially dangerous. The estimated cost of repairs was $800,000. We should sell it, one of my property managers suggested. The building is old, in a declining neighborhood. Cut our losses and invest somewhere more profitable. I visited Maple Street myself. The building was old, but it housed families who'd lived there for years. Many were elderly on fixed incomes or single parents working multiple jobs. The neighborhood was struggling, but there was a community center, a library, and schools nearby. How much would rents need to increase to cover the repair costs? I asked Margaret. She did the calculations. About 30% over 5 years. But most current tenants couldn't afford that. We'd lose half of them. What if we do the repairs but keep rent increases minimal? Then we don't recoup the investment for 15 years. It's not a good financial decision. I thought about Grandma's letter. About building something worthy of my values. About proving profit and compassion weren't mutually exclusive. Here's what we're going to do, I said. We'll finance the repairs through the company's reserves. We'll keep rent increases at inflation, about 3% per year. We'll offer current tenants first right of refusal on their units after repairs. That's going to significantly impact our bottom line this year, Margaret warned. This year, yes, I agreed. But we'll have a fully renovated, safe building with happy, stable tenants. That's worth more than a quick profit. We did the repairs. It was expensive and stressful. But when the work was complete, something remarkable happened. The Maple Street tenants organized a thank you event. They invited local news coverage to showcase a landlord who'd chosen to invest in affordable housing rather than displacing residents. The publicity was incredible. Carter Properties was featured in articles about ethical business practices. Community organizations began referring good tenants to our properties. Other property owners reached out asking how we made our model work. And surprisingly, our overall profits began to increase. I don't understand, one of my staff members said, looking at quarterly reports. We're making less on individual properties, but overall revenue is up. It's because our occupancy rates are higher and turnover is lower, Margaret explained. We're spending less on advertising for empty units, less on cleaning and repairs between tenants, less on eviction proceedings. Stable, happy tenants are actually more profitable than constantly churning through people. It was exactly what I'd hoped to prove. 9 months after taking over, Marcus filed his lawsuit contesting the will. His lawyers argued that Grandma had been unduly influenced, that she wasn't of sound mind, that the will didn't reflect her true wishes. The case dragged on for 8 months. It was stressful and expensive, but Howard had prepared well. We had doctors' evaluations, the video recording, testimony from witnesses who'd spoken with Grandma before she died. Most importantly, we had her detailed notes explaining exactly why she'd made her decision. The judge ruled in my favor. Eleanor Carter was clearly of sound mind when she made her will. She had valid reasons for her decisions based on observed behavior of her heirs. The will stands as written. Marcus's lawyer suggested an appeal, but my brother declined. What's the point? He told reporters outside the courthouse. My sister has already destroyed the company my grandmother built. There's nothing left worth fighting for. But that wasn't true. Carter Properties was thriving in a different way than before. A year after taking over, I did something that shocked everyone. I sold 15 of our properties, the most rundown buildings that would have required massive investments to bring up to standard. But instead of selling to the highest bidder, I sold them to a non-profit housing organization at a reduced price, with the agreement that they'd remain affordable housing. You just gave away $3 million. One of my staff members said, incredulous. I sold properties for a fair price to buyers who will maintain them as affordable housing, I corrected. And I used the proceeds to pay down company debt and create a larger reserve fund for maintaining our remaining properties. The move got more positive press. Carter Properties was becoming known as a company that balanced profit with social responsibility. We were profitable, growing, and making a genuine positive impact on communities. 2 years after the will reading, my parents reached out. Mother called me on a Tuesday evening. Sophia, we need to talk about your grandmother's estate. The estate is settled, I said. The lawsuit failed. There's nothing left to discuss. I'm not calling about the lawsuit, Mother said. I'm calling because we need money. This was unexpected. What do you mean? Your father made some bad investments. We're in debt. We need help. I thought about all the times they'd told me I wasn't entitled to anything. All the times they'd supported Marcus's ruthless business practices. All the years they'd made me feel like I wasn't good enough. How much debt? I asked. $2 million, Mother admitted. Your father invested in a development that fell through. We could lose the house, your grandmother's house. What about Marcus? Can't he help? Marcus's business ventures haven't been successful, Mother said carefully. After losing Carter Properties, he tried to start his own company. It didn't work out. He's in financial trouble too. I sat with the information. My family, who'd prioritized wealth above everything, who'd supported Marcus's exploitation of vulnerable people, who'd cut me off completely when I'd inherited the business. They were broke and asking me for help. I'll help with the debt, I said finally. But there are conditions. What conditions? Mother asked warily. First, you sell Grandma's house and downsize to something you can afford. No more living beyond your means. That house has been in the Carter family for 40 years, and it's too expensive for you to maintain. Sell it. Use the proceeds to pay down some of the debt. What else? Mother asked tightly. Dad gets financial counseling. Professional help to understand what went wrong and how to avoid it in the future. Your father won't agree to that. Then I won't help, I said firmly. Those are my terms. Downsize, get counseling, and I'll help with the remaining debt. Otherwise, you're on your own. There was silence on the line. Then Mother said quietly, we'll discuss it and get back to you. They called back 3 days later. They'd agreed to my terms. I arranged for Carter Properties to purchase Grandma's house from them at fair market value. We converted it into a community center for the neighborhood, with after-school programs and resources for families. I paid off my parents' remaining debt, about $1.2 million after the house sale, with the condition that it was a gift, not a loan, and there would be no future bailouts. Thank you, Father said when we finalized the arrangements. It was the first time he'd thanked me for anything in years. You're welcome, I said. But Dad, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this because you're entitled to it. I'm doing it because I can afford to help and because Grandma's business success makes it possible. The same business you wanted to take away from me. Father was quiet for a moment. Then he said, you've done well with the company. Better than I expected. It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement. I'm trying to do what Grandma asked, I said. Build something worthy of her legacy. 3 years after inheriting the business, I'd transformed Carter Properties completely. We owned fewer properties but operated them more efficiently and ethically. Profit margins were healthy, not as high as under Marcus's ruthless management, but sustainable and growing. We'd won awards from tenant advocacy groups and business ethics organizations. Several business schools had done case studies on our model. And most importantly, we were housing families who might otherwise struggle to find affordable, safe places to live. I received a letter from one of our tenants, a single mother named Maria who lived at Maple Street Apartments. Dear Miss Carter, I wanted to thank you for what you've done with this building. 2 years ago, I was living in a place with broken heat and mice, but I couldn't afford anything better on my income. When I heard about the Maple Street renovations, I applied even though I didn't think I could afford it. You kept the rents reasonable while making the building safe and clean. My kids have a good place to live. They're doing better in school because they're not stressed about our living situation. I have hope for our future. You could have sold this building and made more money, but you chose to help families like mine instead. Thank you for seeing us as people, not just sources of rent money. With gratitude, Maria Rodriguez. I kept that letter in my desk drawer and read it whenever I faced difficult business decisions. Reminded me why I was doing this work. 4 years after the will reading, Marcus reached out. We met for coffee at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our homes. He looked different. Less polished, less arrogant. Almost humble. Thank you for meeting me, he said. I wasn't sure you would. What do you want, Marcus? I asked. To apologize, he said. For everything. For how I treated you, for how I ran the business, for contesting the will, all of it. I waited, skeptical. After I lost the company, I tried to prove everyone wrong, Marcus continued. I started my own real estate business using the money Grandma left me. I was going to show everyone, that my methods worked. What happened? I failed, Marcus admitted. I bought properties cheap, tried to flip them for maximum profit, and ended up with buildings I couldn't sell and tenants I couldn't keep. I learned the hard way what you've been trying to tell me. You can't build a sustainable business by exploiting people. He looked at me directly. You were right. Grandma was right. I was so focused on profit that I forgot about the human cost. I evicted families, priced out elderly people, destroyed communities. And for what? Short-term gains that didn't last. What are you doing now? I asked. Working as a property manager for someone else, Marcus said. Making an hourly wage, learning how the business actually works from the ground up. It's humbling, but it's educational. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to make amends, Marcus said. I can't undo what I did, but I can learn from it and do better going forward. And I want you to know that you've accomplished something I never could. You've made that business profitable while actually helping people. I studied my brother. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine remorse and growth. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully. It doesn't erase the past, but it's a start. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Marcus said. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. Grandma was right to give you the business. You're doing exactly what it needed. After he left, I sat in the cafe thinking about family, legacy, and forgiveness. Marcus had been shaped by our parents' values just as I'd been. He'd thought he was doing everything right by maximizing profits. It had taken failure for him to see another way. 5 years after inheriting Carter Properties, I made a major announcement at our annual staff meeting. We're expanding, I said. We've been approached by 3 other property management companies interested in merging with us. They want to adopt our model, profitable but ethical management. The staff applauded. Carter Properties was becoming a movement, not just a company. We're also establishing the Eleanor Carter Foundation, I continued. We'll use a portion of our annual profits to fund affordable housing initiatives, support tenant advocacy organizations, and provide emergency assistance to families facing housing crises. I pulled out a framed photo of Grandma. 5 years ago, my grandmother gave me an incredible gift. Not just a business but a mission. She asked me to transform her empire into something worthy of my values. I think we've done that. Margaret stood up. You've done more than that. You've shown that business can be a force for good. That profit and compassion aren't mutually exclusive. That's a legacy worth having. That evening, I visited Grandma's grave. I'd been going regularly since taking over the business, updating her on our progress, asking her advice on difficult decisions. We did it, Grandma, I said, placing flowers on her headstone. We built something you'd be proud of. Something that makes money while helping people. Something that proves your faith in me was justified. I thought about the will reading 5 years ago. About my parents saying I wasn't entitled to anything. About Marcus's smug confidence that he'd inherit everything. About the shock on everyone's faces when Grandma's true wishes were revealed. You knew exactly what you were doing, I said to Grandma's grave. You knew I was the only one who could transform the business. You knew giving it to Marcus would have been the easy choice but the wrong choice. You knew I'd face opposition and doubt, but you believed I could handle it. The wind rustled through the trees. I imagined it was Grandma's way of agreeing. 6 years after the will reading, I received an unexpected visitor at the office. A young woman in her 20s, professionally dressed, approached my assistant. I'm looking for Sophia Carter, she said. I'm Sophia, I said, coming out of my office. Can I help you? I'm Jennifer Morrison, the woman said. I'm a business student at the University of Washington. I'm writing my thesis on Carter Properties and the transformation you've led. Would you be willing to answer some questions? I invited her into my office. Jennifer explained that business schools across the country were studying our model. What you've done is revolutionary, she said. You've proven that a company can prioritize both profit and social. How did you know it would work? I didn't know, I admitted. I just knew it was worth trying. My grandmother gave me permission to fail while pursuing something meaningful. That freedom was the real gift. What advice would you give to other business leaders trying to balance profit and purpose? Jennifer asked. Start with your values, I said. Figure out what you believe is right, not just what's profitable. Then find ways to align your business practices with those values. It's not always easy, and you'll face criticism from people who prioritize short-term gains over long-term sustainability. But if you stay committed to your principles and make smart decisions, you can build something that's both successful and meaningful. Jennifer took notes furiously. Your family opposed your approach initially. How did you handle that resistance? By staying true to my values even when it cost me relationships, I said. My parents cut me off completely when I took over the business. My brother sued to contest the will. For years, I had to operate without family support. Do you regret it? Jennifer asked. Sometimes, I admitted. Family is important and being cut off hurt. But I couldn't compromise my values just to maintain relationships. Eventually, my family came to understand what I was doing. Some of them even apologized. But I couldn't have predicted that when I started. Jennifer's thesis became a published paper that won awards. Carter Properties became a case study in business schools nationwide. We received requests from companies wanting to learn our model. 7 years after the will reading, my mother asked to meet for lunch. We'd been slowly rebuilding our relationship, but it was still fragile and formal. I wanted to tell you something, Mother said over salad. I was wrong about you. I set down my fork, surprised. When you chose social work over business, I thought you were wasting your potential, Mother continued. When you married Ben instead of someone from our social circle, I thought you were settling. When you rejected the family business, I thought you were ungrateful. She took a breath. But I was wrong about all of it. You weren't rejecting success. You were defining it differently. You weren't wasting your potential. You were using it for something meaningful. And you weren't ungrateful. You were holding out for something worth being grateful for. Tears filled her eyes. Your grandmother saw what I couldn't see. She saw that you had the character and the vision to transform her business into something better. She was right to choose you. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. Can I ask you something? Mother said. What would you have done if the will had gone the other way? If Marcus had inherited everything and you'd gotten nothing? I thought about it. I'd have been hurt, but I'd have continued with my life. I'd have kept working as a social worker, kept helping families, kept living according to my values. I didn't need Grandma's money or business to have a meaningful life. But now you have both, Mother observed. Meaning and success. Now I have the opportunity to prove they're not mutually exclusive, I corrected. That's what Grandma wanted. Someone who could build a successful business that also serves the community. I'm still learning how to balance both, but I'm grateful for the chance to try. Mother reached across the table and took my hand. I'm proud of you, Sophia. I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of the woman you've become and the work you're doing. It was the first time my mother had said she was proud of me since I'd graduated from college. The words meant more than I'd expected. 8 years after the will reading, Carter Properties celebrated a major milestone. We'd grown to manage over 300 properties across 5 states, all operated according to our ethical model. Annual revenue exceeded $12 million, with healthy profit margins and industry-leading tenant satisfaction scores. At the anniversary celebration, I gave a speech to our staff, partners, and community members. 8 years ago, my grandmother entrusted me with her life's work. She didn't give me a business, she gave me a mission. To prove that real estate could be profitable while also serving communities. To show that treating tenants with dignity and fairness wasn't just moral, it was good business. I looked around the room at the people who'd helped make this vision reality. We've built something extraordinary together. A company that makes money while helping people. A business that's respected by both investors and tenant advocates. A model that's being studied and replicated across the country. But the real measure of our success isn't our revenue or our growth, I continued. It's the families we've housed. The communities we've supported. The lives we've impacted. When I read letters from tenants thanking us for giving them safe, affordable homes, that's when I know we're succeeding. I pulled out Grandma's letter, the one she'd left me after the will reading. My grandmother wrote, "Transform my empire into something worthy of your values." That's what we've done. We've transformed a business focused solely on profit into a business that balances profit with purpose. We've proven that you don't have to choose between success and integrity. I raised my glass. To Eleanor Carter, who had the courage to change her will and the wisdom to see what I could become. To everyone in this room who's worked to make this vision real. And to the next 8 years of growth, impact, and proving that business can be a force for good. The room erupted in applause. That night I drove to the cemetery one more time. I stood at Grandma's grave under the stars and thought about everything that had happened. My parents said I wasn't entitled to anything, I told Grandma. They were right in a way. I wasn't entitled to your business. I had to earn it by proving I could transform it into something better. The will reading changed my life. But not because of the money or the properties. It changed my life because you believed in me when no one else did. Because you saw potential in me that my family missed. Because you gave me permission to try something different. I placed fresh flowers on her headstone. I hope I've made you proud, Grandma. I hope the business we've built is worthy of your faith in me. I hope every family we've housed, every community we've supported, every life we've touched is part of your legacy now. The wind picked up, rustling the flowers. I imagined Grandma smiling, satisfied that her gamble on me had paid off. Thank you, I whispered, for seeing who I really was. For giving me the chance to prove it. For teaching me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the positive impact we have on the world. I walked back to my car thinking about the will reading 8 years ago. My parents had said I wasn't entitled to anything. The will reading had proved otherwise. But the real proof wasn't the inheritance itself. It was what I'd done with it. I'd transformed Grandma's empire into something that honored both her entrepreneurial spirit and my social values. I'd built a business that was profitable and purposeful, successful and meaningful. That was the legacy worth having. That was what I'd truly inherited, not just properties and money, but the opportunity to prove that business could be a force for good in the world. And every day, with every ethical decision, with every family housed, with every community served, I was proving that my grandmother's faith in me had been justified. My parents had been wrong. I was entitled to something, not because of my last name or my family connections, but because I'd proven I could handle the responsibility that came with wealth and power. I could use both to make a difference. 8 years after that shocking will reading, I finally understood what Grandma had really given me. Not a business empire. Not financial security. But the chance to define success on my own terms. And the freedom to prove that profit and purpose, wealth and compassion, success and integrity could coexist. That was the inheritance that truly mattered. And I'd spend the rest of my life making sure it was an inheritance worth passing on.